And now we're just waiting for Sean.
Sean is here.
Sean is here. Okay, then I can call the special meeting of Springfield Economic Development Agency to order and ask for roll call, please.
Board Member Van Gordon.
Present.
Board Member Pitts.
Here.
Board Member Moe.
Here.
Board Member Rodley.
Here.
Board Member Stair.
Here.
Chair Woodrow.
Here.
Board Member Pictionary.
Here.
And Board Member Bernie.
Here.
And with that, I will turn the meeting over to Courtney with her information on the RFQ.
Good evening. Sorry, I was working with my mute button there. I appreciate everybody coming in first on the summer break, although I know folk have been very busy, so I don't want to downplay that it probably hasn't been much of a break. We have provided you a packet that includes a couple documents. It includes a memo that outlines a little bit more detail about the process ahead, that the RFQ is used to shepherd from requests for proposals or for bids, I should say, or qualifications all the way through selection. I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint just to give us some imagery. Everything in the PowerPoint is what we are planning, is within the packet already. So there's no new information, just easier for navigating. Let's see, I seem to have a box in my view. Let me get rid of that. Okay. So the goal for the evening is to talk through the actual request for qualifications document that was included. That is primarily complete. We're really at about probably north of 95%, but we want to make sure we have eyes on it. We're discussing the content in it. There's still some minor edits, although they're not heavy in content, just some catches and commas and additional technical language related to setback lines and elements of the site. I do want to talk about an overview of the key dates and timeframes that are in the RFQ, not only the timeframes that are listed in the document, but also what's going on alongside of it as we're moving through it, just so we can kind of talk about those timeframes. We also have on for approval the board's head nod towards the technical recommending committee structure. So we're outlining what those positions are in that technical review committee, and then the role they play in recommending preferred development team to the board for decision-making and interviewing. And then that ultimately this evening, we are looking for your approval to proceed with that RFQ document under the structure as outlined. Maybe there are minor punctuation type edits, but nothing of substance would change from tonight until August 30th. So just want to drop right into the document to start. We are trying to keep the document both technical, providing some technical information, but also making a point to really cue into key themes of Springfield, the market in Springfield, and the many years of work on the vision in the Glenwood Refinement Plan, and then clarity around exactly what we're requesting from development teams as well. So the document itself ultimately describes the opportunity generally. It describes the community. It then gives some high level but technical detail about the site itself, from dimensions to environmental conditions and different elements of infrastructure and utilities. And then we are also including current market data that was completed by Echo Northwest in the last couple weeks. And so that market data, there's both a 2019 snapshot that would be available and now this 2021 to give development teams some understanding of where rent is trending, where vacancy or absorption of units is trending, and very specific to the Springfield market. Oftentimes we're rolled into Eugene. So this gives us the ability to provide data from both perspectives. It also outlines the submission requirements, general structure and timing for them to expect, especially because we have some tight timeframes and we want groups to be prepared that we may be asking them to come in for interviews. And so we want them to go ahead and pencil that on their calendars now, especially since a lot of that will be happening between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And then it outlines the specific information that we're requesting. The content in it, I mean, first we owe a lot of gratitude to this board because you spent a lot of time with us in May and June, wrestling with topics and different perspectives on approaches. But ultimately, you gave us the direction we needed to kind of drill down into exactly what we were asking for and how we were prioritizing that and communicating it. So the document itself is asking for them to submit verifiable information to us about their experience, including references. We do have a financial capacity form that will allow us to really verify that capacity or ability to bring a project to fruition, who the design and development team is, but also their general philosophy for approaching a project. And we are asking them to respond to their experience approaching complicated sites, constraints, complexities. While we're not asking them for proposals on this specific site, we do want to hear them talk through and articulate how they've worked with communities in the past, how they've worked with elected bodies and multiple agency partners. And then it was really important to the board that we also understand their business practices from DEI work, local sourcing, labor relations. And so we are asking for some insight into how they approach those different layers of developing sites. I keep this up because I keep it up. I have it actually printed and taped to the wall behind my calendar or my computer, mainly to just stay tracking that we're intentionally staying on the course we set. This is the original course that we set back when the board in late spring directed us to move forward on the RFQ, but on an efficiently paced RFQ as quickly as we could. We are here at this point, midpoint in August, so we are on track right now. The plan then is to release the RFQ August 30th. So we will remain on track, and our ultimate target is to be back in front of the board at the first meeting in December, which looks to fall on December 6th, with a recommendation for board consideration into interviews. So just looking at what this actually looks like in the document. So this is on the left, what teams looking to bid will see. That August 30th, basically this is the 6-week window that the bid will be open for interested groups. It releases on August 30th per the board's approval this evening. We would schedule an optional information session. At this point, we will plan for it to be virtual based on the changing health policies and also the amount of time. It does take, it does make it accessible that it's virtual at this point because there isn't a need to fly in for an in-person meeting, but it would still be optional. We would also host an optional on-site visit for September 15th. We've begun engaging community partners on this date so that they're not just meeting with us, but they also have an opportunity to meet with our Chamber of Commerce, with other agencies and providers, people who are important to the work we do. And then we would have the proposals or the bids due by October 15th. So it's open for about 6 weeks, month and a half. In conversations with different developers, this seems like an appropriate amount of time. It's not, it is a little bit tight, but not undoable. And because it is a request for qualifications and not proposals, the general feedback is that this is very doable and reasonable for this time frame. So then it moves into what we're kind of considering the completeness and initial scoring window. So that means that we have documents in hand. We're determining that they met basic criteria. We're engaging some of our legal and financial staff to just ensure that boxes were checked as required. And at that point, we also have a technical recommending committee that would do initial scoring of those received packages. From there, the top scoring teams would be invited to a set of interviews with the technical committee. The technical committee could determine to interview all. They could determine to interview only top scoring if there's a clear break. But this is something that we anticipate could take several weeks to schedule, a week to schedule, a week to do the interview. So at this point, we're still plugging along, relatively busy week after week. But we are anticipating after the 19th to go quiet for about a week and a half, knowing that people will probably be at either virtually or hopefully in person around a family table having turkey. And then we bring them back right away, preparing to have a board discussion on December 6th. And in that discussion with the board, it really is a conversation about whether the board would like to interview the top team in the attempt to still make a selection by the end of the calendar year. But we're really not bound at this point. The board could decide that you want to interview multiple, and that timeline of whether that moves into January or February to do multiple rounds of interviews is truly at the board's discretion. We don't require it and we're not setting expectations for it, but we just want you to know that you will have that flexibility once you get into it and depending on who, what teams put information in front. And then the other component that we committed to bringing back was the structure of the technical recommending committee. So it is sort of traditional best practice that in these cases, technical staff, most often including outside of the agency, are involved in initial review and scoring, and then ultimately make the recommendation for the top candidates for interview. As of right now, we have outlined the general positions of that committee, and we are asking for your thumbs up on this outline. We do not have individuals assigned to this for a number of reasons. One, we don't want to suppose that any peers we might reach out to are not somehow involved in a submitting team. So we want to give some time to make sure that we don't create a conflict of interest there. Second, we want to make sure that we don't necessarily put a big highlight on top of an individual that may then ultimately be lobbied by interested teams. We just want to be real cautious that we really kind of protect the integrity of the process and the fairness of that process. So our work would begin to start populating this committee just after the October 15th deadline. So I breezed through all that relatively quickly. What I want to make sure is that we had the full context, but then I want to offer some time for the board if we want to go back and if there are questions within kind of the individual elements of that process or the document itself. So I'm happy to really kind of start at the document itself if the board would like. I will note that we do also have Abe Farkas and Lorelei Juntonen on the call with us, who has helped us move through in May and June and beyond. And then we also have our finance director, Nathan and Christina Kraser here from legal, just so we can make sure we can answer any questions that you might have. And if you like, Chair, do you want me to stop share so you can see everyone? That help?
Yeah, that probably would help. Yes.
You do that. Oh, and then I see people the minute I do that.
There you go. Councilor Broadley.
Thank you. My question is not about anything that you shared, but since we have this very short time frame, my question is around outreach and what that looks like, and if that's even like called out as part of the RFQ process or not.
It would be dependent. So there isn't outreach to direct community as part of that RFQ. And in fact, the RFQ is structured to ask them not to do some of that individual outreach. I think the question might be, what type of outreach specifically would we want to engage in this phase? Once we get to a selection of a partner, then I believe we're looking at some very robust outreach with that partner as we start to put that vision into action in the coming months or after steps of the selection. But we would definitely be open to recommendations of ways to engage. One element that we have identified as critical to the selection committee is to bring in members of the Planning Commission, which have been appointed to represent the community vision, as well as members of the Community Development, the Development Advisory Committee, the CDAC. And so I think that's one hope, is that we can start linking some of those appointed positions and vision work into the technical review.
To go along with what Corey was asking, maybe how are people going to find out that the RFQ is out there?
So from a developer standpoint, we will begin to share it through networks and ultimately through networks, and then also through consultants that we have brought in to assist us with that. From a community standpoint, I think we also are in a position of issuing a press release, making ourselves available to speak at different events or different community groups to answer questions, but also discuss what this process is and what the process isn't, and sort of the different phase of selecting a partner. And then moving that selection into actual vision work and development.
Okay, did that help, Corey?
Yes, that was my initial question, but then I was like, I kind of appreciate hearing about outreach for the committee too. So now I know both of those. Thank you.
Leonard?
Thanks, Marilee. Courtney, are you going to be seeking the SEDA board's input on naming the technical recommending committee structure within each of these appointments?
We were not going to request the SEDA board specific direction on it, although if board members do have recommendations or interest, I would encourage you to email me those and we can engage with leadership on it. Ultimately, right now, we're looking for the head nod on the overall structure and then preparing to know who's available as we get closer to that October time.
Will you be taking volunteers from each of the bodies that you're selecting from?
Well, I would hope they'd be volunteers and not forced, but ultimately, yes, that's the goal. In some of those cases, we would probably look to, for example, on the Planning Commission, we would look to the chair to assist with the recommendation. We'd want to use their process, similar to Home's Good. We would look to their leadership for their selection.
So the leadership of each body would be empowered to appoint.
It would be
within.
dependent on their internal policies.
Okay,
In the,
thanks.
I can't speak to the Community Development Advisory Committee, but I believe the Planning Commission's process for assigning those types of liaison positions is to do it collectively rather than having the Planning Commission chair nominate or designate someone. I think someone usually volunteers and then they vote on it. And I would imagine the Community Development Advisory Committee functions similarly, although I haven't observed that personally.
Joe Pishneri? Mute, you're on mute.
Oh, there we go. How's that?
That's good.
Sean had his hand up too, but I think I still beat him. So I personally, I think it would be wise for us to not be involved in the actual picking. I think just to keep the cleanliness and the integrity of the committee, so that way it doesn't appear to be loaded or can't be loaded. I think the more we stay away from that, probably the wiser it would be. That's just my opinion. That's all I have to say about that. As far as I'm concerned, we can move forward based on what I've heard.
I can't see Sean, but Sean, did you have your hand waving?
Yeah, I think the document looks great. I think it looks like it's ready to go. I have sort of, I agree with Joe on the actual scoring committee, right? Because we really want to have the most technical, unbiased approach possible. The one question I did have, right, like we still own the property that has the organ plant on it, right?
It was a pipe organ plant. It is no longer. The gentleman who manufactured those retired and is actually who sold us the property upon his retirement. But we do still, that is one of the pieces we own.
Do we need to call, and maybe we're not to that step yet, but there's some probably arguably historical items that are on that, like the forge and things like that. And maybe that's a conversation after this step. But I just keep wanting to care for those, right? Because they have significance in this community.
That is a step for us to ensure that we're really clear about the different assets and structures and components of the pieces. And we have a great relationship with the current tenant in there who has a similar interest in preserving the story and kind of that theme and tenor. So it is on the list and it is top of mind.
Okay.
Is that something our historic commission can work with, or is that not in their area?
I think that we want to be thoughtful, coordinating with sort of the different partners we need at the table to how we approach those things and how we capture them, and what makes sense to capture from a story standpoint, and what, whether there are some environmental issues as well. So we'll kind of look at the whole piece and see what departments come in and can assist as we go through it, but also we'll need some outside consultants also.
If there are individual objects that are of historic interest to the city, then that is one of the functions of the Historic Commission. In addition to their land use and development role is fairly prescribed in the Glenwood Refinement Plan. It's applicable, and it has a historic resources element that talks about which properties may be, considered for building, historic designation. But as far as individual property goes, then that is a place that the Historic Commission can be looped in thoughtfully as to objects that might be of city significance and preservation. And then obviously, the museum staff and other entities as well might participate in that.
Thank you.
And one other quick point, and I say it every time, and it is slightly off topic, but I would really love to get a different SEDA logo.
That may have come up. Neil's camera's off, but he's smiling because that may have come up in the last week. We may know some people.
It looks great. Thank you.
Any other questions or input? Steve?
I've been very critical of the process so far. And poor Courtney, anyway, I want her to know, and you to know, that this document is one of the finest documents I've ever seen prepared. And I think it's great. So if you're voting on it, that's my vote for it. When you're ready to vote for it, that's what it'll be. Thank you, Courtney.
Thanks, Steve.
I appreciate that a lot.
Yes. Any other questions or input? Then our next move is a motion. Is that correct, Courtney?
That is correct. Yep.
All righty. Do I hear a motion?
I'll give you a motion. Go ahead.
All righty.
Oh, you go ahead. I don't know what to read here, so you make it. I'll second it.
I don't know either as far as what's scribed, but what's the motion?
It's a motion to approve release of the drafted RFQ document and selection steps, including approval of the technical review and recommending committee structure.
I make a motion to what she said.
I'll second it.
All right.
Second anything.
We have a motion. We have a second.
Here,
we need a roll-
officially. How about officially? I make a motion to approve the release of the drafted RFQ document and selection steps, including approval of the technical review and recommending committee structure. Boom.
All righty.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Then we'll ask for roll call vote, please.
Board Member Van Gordon,
Yes.
Board Member Pitts,
Aye.
Board Member Mo,
Yes.
Board Member Rodley,
Yes.
Board Member Stair,
Aye.
Chair Woodrow,
Yes,
Board Member Pictionary,
Aye.
and Board Member Bernie.
Aye.
it's unanimous vote to approve. Any further comments, information that we need, anything further discussion?
Not from my side. I appreciate it.
I would just like to say thank you for everybody taking the time to be part of this special meeting. Yeah, I know that we all came in the midst of our ridiculous heat wave that we've been putting up with for a while. So I appreciate everybody taking the time and showing up for this and supporting it. I think it's a good step. And we're headed in the right direction.
This is our job.
Is it adjourned?
Thanks. Steve.
That's all,
I think-
that's all, Joe.
Yep.
Okay. We'll see y'all later.
I'm gonna go ahead and adjourn us. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Courtney, for all the work.
Good night,
Thank you.
everybody.